Senate Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, last year, Republicans followed through on our promises to the American people. The cornerstone of that was the working families tax cuts and the rest of that landmark legislation. A bill that helps deliver safer streets, put more money in Americans' pockets, and create new opportunities to get ahead. Mr. President, I've said that we did 10 years of legislating in this bill. There's a lot in it. It's generational in terms of its content and its impact. And this year, hardworking Americans will start to see the benefits of what Republicans delivered. Mr. President, the top of that list is the permanent tax relief in this bill. For too many Americans, affordability remains a challenge. And affordability begins with how much money you have in your budget and in your pocket. Thanks to the working families tax cuts, hardworking Americans will see bigger paychecks this year. And that's breathing room that families can count on this year and in the years to come, because Republicans' tax reform is permanent. And as the W-2s go out this month and Americans prepare to file their taxes, they can also expect to see benefits from the working families tax cuts in their tax returns. They will be able to take a larger standard deduction. And seniors will be able to take a new bonus deduction on top of that. The child tax credit is now worth $2,200 per child, and it's linked to inflation, so it will never lose its value. Workers who earn tips and overtime won't have to pay federal taxes on that income either. And all of that adds up to bigger refunds come April. Mr. President, the working families tax cuts provide much-needed relief after a years-long inflation crisis that is still straining families' budgets. And passing this bill and delivering an average $3,700 tax cut to hardworking Americans was a priority for Republicans. But that's not the only thing this bill did. Far from it. We also made generational investments in health care, national security, and public safety. Mr. President, since 2005, more than 100 hospitals in rural parts of this country have closed their doors. It's important that we support and strengthen critical health care access points for Americans who live in rural areas. So in our legislation, Republicans created the $50 billion Rural Health Transformation Fund to bolster rural health care, to expand access, modernize care, and strengthen the rural health care workforce. Our landmark legislation also addresses pressing security needs. In the months since this bill passed, not a single illegal immigrant has been released into the United States. And that's thanks in part to the generational investment that we made to sustain the Trump administration's border security policies. Our bill invests in hiring more border agents, increasing detention capacity, and providing the technology and resources needed to stop the flow of illegal immigrants and illegal drugs across our borders. And then, Mr. President, there's national security. After 4 years of the Biden administration and Democrats putting defense spending on the back burner, Republicans made a historic investment to help rebuild our military so that it can deter and defeat today's threats and tomorrow's. Our legislation boosts shipbuilding and defense production capacity. It grows our Air Force fleet, protects the homeland with the Golden Dome missile defense system and modernization of our nuclear deterrent, and more. And we're continuing our efforts with the kind of sustained investment that's needed to keep America's military strong for the long term. Mr. President, our landmark legislation also makes a serious investment in public safety here at home. That starts by supporting the police. There's funding for state and local law enforcement agencies in this bill, including boots-on-the-ground efforts to combat violent crime. Our legislation supports efforts to combat drug trafficking and target precursor chemicals used in the production of fentanyl. And it provides resources for state and local law enforcement to assist federal officers in enforcing immigration laws. Mr. President, I'm also proud of the investment this bill makes in modernizing America's air traffic control system. The systems being used in air traffic control towers today are in desperate need of an update. And our legislation provides the support needed to deploy state-of-the-art technology across America. And I'm glad that the modernization efforts this bill supports are now underway. Mr. President, there's a lot more I could talk about when it comes to our once-in-a-generation legislation. Its support for small businesses, farmers, and ranchers. Its provisions addressing waste, fraud, and abuse in federal programs to save taxpayer money. Or its support for the next generation through more educational choice and investment accounts for a secure future. But I'll leave it here, Mr. President. Republicans delivered a big win for the American people last year with our bill. And in 2026, the American people are going to feel its impact. And I look forward to that story unfolding, literally, Mr. President, in every corner of America. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsterbrooks.